Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Yegi project. Today we have Naresh Vissa, who is an expert in media marketing and is also an entrepreneur who wrote best-selling books. So I'm super excited to interview him and hear his story of what has brought him up to this industry and this business. Now, looking at his background, I was so impressed with his educational background and his entrepreneurship background because in today's world, we do really need to have a really good understanding of all aspects of online marketing and everything that goes into that. And when I looked into his company, it really summed up everything you need to be doing in order to have a successful business. And that is what this podcast is about, is to grow ourselves and our businesses. Hi, I'm Yegi. I'm an entrepreneur and success coach who wants it all: family, luxury, career, and the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. And I'll do whatever it takes to get there. I created the Yegi project to document my journey and inspire others to do the same. My mission is to change the world by influencing and leading others to do what they love and live fulfilled lives. Please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much for that intro and for the opportunity to be on the show. Like you mentioned, my name is Naresh Vissa. I live in Tampa, Florida. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, so I'm based in the United States. I run a digital marketing agency. I've been running it for uh, almost 14 years. We're coming up on 14 years. So I got it started, not 14 years, 13 years. I got
Wow,
it
you got
started in
into it right when
2013.
it was starting to boom.
Yeah, it was very different back then because I was one of the few in the space and one of the few who was almost full time, 90% working from home. So it was 2013 when I got started. So we're coming up on 12 years actually. Um, and the company is a full service online and digital marketing agency, from design work to development, web development to copywriting and SEO, pay per click, online public relations. We do a lot of digital media, social media advertising, pay per click on social media to podcasting, podcast production, online public relations. So it's full service and it has
Like I
evolved.
said,
And I'd be
honestly, it sounds like everything that somebody needs to be doing in order to have a successful business in today's world, your company is covering that. And honestly, as an entrepreneur myself, it's really nice to see all of that offered by one company because like I said, I don't know your company too well, but the sound of it being full circle, I could see that you will be understanding my business and kind of have a holistic approach of online marketing and how to push that. Would you say your company works kind of like one on one with the entrepreneurs, or how do you guys work with your clients?
We work with, I would say, more so businesses than with individuals or with like one specific client. So we work with small and medium-sized businesses. We have worked with large corporations, very large real estate companies, financial media companies, publicly traded companies, and we still do work with some very large companies. But generally, our company works hand in hand with marketing departments at companies. So the marketing department might need additional help from the outside because they don't have stuff in-house, or maybe as my company has survived many recessions, not many, but a few recessions, layoffs, not layoffs at our company per se, but layoffs as far as the industry goes or the country goes. So surviving those has actually helped our company, because when marketing departments get cut in half or get cut altogether, someone still needs to do the work. In our company, that's where we step in. And like I said, it's all in-house. So a marketing department may have had a designer on staff and a pay-per-click person on staff and a podcasting person on staff. Well, let's just say a sound editor on staff and a and so now they can just come to us. It's like 1/10 the cost for us to do it all per se. And my company didn't start like this though. It only started by
Well, then
with just
let's
me.
pause right there. I got too excited, started asking you all the questions that are very business related. But let's go back to your story. So, how did you get started? So, you went to school for what? You went to school initially for broadcast journalism, finance, and accounting, right? For your undergrad.
Yes.
How did all that transition into marketing?
Great question, because I do combine all of my majors, my background, my study. So broadcast and digital journalism was one of my majors undergrad, and that was when the media landscape was shifting from traditional to online and digital. So I saw firsthand that transition. Literally, my first 2 years, I had to edit video, for example, using dusty old 1970s style technologies, frame from frame. And then my last
Wow.
2 years, I was editing video on computers using computer software. So I actually
Wow.
saw old versus new. And that exposed me to digital media. It exposed me to media in general and the online space. Now, you also brought up finance and accounting. I'd started to develop an interest in finance and accounting. And today, Krish Media Marketing, most of our clients come from the financial industry, mostly real estate now. But when I got started, it was 19 out of 20 clients were from the financial industry because I
Wow.
speak that jargon and that language. I did work on Wall Street for a little bit, for a couple of years as an equities analyst and a financial analyst. And I still had that background in media, and then I went to graduate school, which you didn't bring up, but I went to graduate school and continued to work in finance, and then combined my background in media and in finance to work at a financial media company or a financial publishing company. So I was doing
Wow.
media stuff for this finance company, and I've got some great experience working full time. And then I said, hey, you know what? It's time to go out on my own. If I'm going to do it, now is the best time to do it. In 2013, looking back, I have no
Why was
regrets.
that the best time? What pushed you to want to, or what made you feel ready to kind of go on your own and start your own company?
Well, the first thing, and this is what I tell aspiring business owners, you want to start something on the side. So I actually started this on the side. It's not like I left my full-time job and I was at zero and trying to build something up from scratch. I was doing this on the side, not because I needed the extra income, but because I felt like I had so much more value to add that I wasn't adding in my full-time job. So I was doing this on the side, and by the time I built up my side hustle to the point where I could pay my bills 100%, then I said, okay, maybe it is whether it's now or in a year or two, maybe it's time to jump in full time on this, and that's what I ended up doing. I ended up jumping in full time within 6 weeks or so of leaving my full time
Wow.
job. It's like I gave myself a 20% raise from what I was making at my full time job. I had control over my schedule, no boss. I was the maker of my own destiny. So I like the freedom and the autonomy. And then I could work from home. I'm also the host of a podcast called The Work From Home Show. It's all about working from home tips and strategies as well as different industries. We interview successful work from homers. It's been around for almost 4.5 years now. So I started
Wow.
working from home, was one of the first people. I'm the first amongst my cohort of friends who was actually making money sitting on a couch at the time and living in Maryland. And um, and and I started with just 2 or 3 services. That's it. Earlier in this interview, I brought up 10 to 15 different services, but it was just 2 to 3 services, and it was just me. And as I started bringing in more clients, they started asking, "Hey, can you do pay per click? Can you do logo designs and other designs?" And that's when I started hiring independent contractors for my company to fill out a lot of that workload.
So, starting 2013, you said, right? You went on your own.
That's correct.
Yes, starting then until now, how have you built your workforce or your team? You said you started hiring independent contractors, but how was that process as a solopreneur initially starting to commit to having a bigger team because it's more people to manage, more costs that goes to hiring people. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
It was a lot of trial and error to start. I think anybody who's hiring will tell you that the first few hires aren't the best hires. They were probably the wrong hires. So I went through that. It was actually a quick learning process. It took about a 1 year period for me to figure out how to find talent, where to find talent. So I did not find talent locally. I tried the whole recruiting from college campuses, contacting professors. None of that worked out. What worked out the best, and I know people in the United States, a lot of them may not like to hear this, but the fact of the matter is today we live in a global marketplace where you can
We
find
do.
talent at your fingertips. And I found excellent talent overseas. We're talking about the Philippines, about India, South Asia in general, Eastern Europe, from Ukraine to Belarus. I found really good talent online on websites like Elance. It used to be called Elance. Now it's called Upwork, on Fiverr, on freelance.com, using these sites where the public is essentially doing the vetting for you. It mitigated the risk. And so since then, really, since about 2014, I haven't had many issues hiring good talent or finding talent through these online platforms.
Wow, that's actually great advice for the listeners. And having the global workforce at your fingertips, like you said, it may be intimidating at first, but like you said, with experience, with trial and error, you do find good talent everywhere, and it can be more cost effective for your business. I am a big advocate of trying to have people like locally. I still like the whole old school, like sitting next to somebody to work with them. But the reality of it is, we do need to accept that things have changed, and we do need to find a way to work more efficiently with the global market. So I'm glad you brought that up for our listeners to give them kind of to open their eyes to more opportunities and possibilities as they make decisions for their businesses. Now, I do, before we move on, so I don't forget, I do want to talk about your two best selling books, the Podcastnomics and the marketing whip your business into the 50 shades of marketing whip your business into shape and dominate your competition. Do you mind talking a little bit about how you even started to write, and how did becoming an author get on your resume?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the broadcast journalism degree that I have, because in journalism there's a lot of writing, and I've always liked writing. To major in journalism, you have to like writing. If you don't like writing, you're never gonna make it in journalism. So I've always liked writing and reporting. So I already had that investigative background, if you want to call it that, as well as the writing and the public. I mentioned that I worked at one of the largest independent publishers in the world, financial publishers in the world. So writing has always been a passion of mine. The genesis, my first book was Podcastnomics. It came out 10 years ago. Can't believe it.
Wow.
2014, yeah. And Podcastnomics is a primer on podcasting, from soup to nuts, everything someone needs to know about podcasting. Now, it needs to be updated. It's 10 years old, so the industry has changed a lot since then, obviously. But when it came out, it was truly a breakthrough primer, and ended up being the the most read and the uh, highest selling podcasting book that had come out to date. So my background in writing, plus the need of, hey, this podcasting thing is about to really take off, and there's a need for this information. I said I need to jump in and write it. So I actually spent like one weekend straight, like 48 hours in my place in Baltimore. I said I'm not going out. I'm just gonna knock this out. And I spent
Wow.
I wrote the entire rough draft and then spent another week or so editing it and tweaking it, and another week after that going through the publishing process, and then a few months after that, it was out and available for sale.
Well, honestly, it sounds like you're a huge visionary. You're kind of ahead of what's going to happen. So it really looks like you kind of saw the digital marketing becoming huge because you saw the transition and you really you really like digged deep and learned about it and made a company out of it. And same with the podcasting book. So I already trust you by just talking to you and hearing your story. So that's honestly great. And that's what I look into. Businesses, I see who's behind it, because from what I've learned as well is it's really the people who make the business, and the businesses you want to work with. And anyways, I can talk about that forever, but let me stay on track with our interview. So big congratulations to you. Like honestly, I do see what a visionary you are, and I would want to pick your brain a little bit about kind of the new trends about all the AI stuff, because a lot of people are freaking out about digital marketing and all of the copy. Even podcasters are kind of freaking out about AI kind of taking over or taking away their business. Do you have any thoughts about that, since we are
Absolutely.
there?
Absolutely. So I do want to talk about AI, but before we get there, talking about the whole visionary thing, the that was 2013, and 7 years later was another inflection point because of the pandemic. Stuff that I was ahead of the curve on, that I was doing, all of a sudden everybody was doing almost overnight in 2020, whether it was podcasting, whether it was learning about digital marketing, because so many people lost their jobs, were stuck at home, and they wanted to pick up and learn new skills. Maybe they even picked up my book. So the space is tighter and more cutthroat than ever, certainly. I was, you could say, a first mover in 2013 to be coming out with a book like that, coming out with a company like that. And so I've had to pivot. It hasn't been all morning in America. I've certainly had to pivot, and I found the niche of real estate. So I had to learn a new industry, not new skills necessary, but there was a lot that I had to learn. And so the bulk of our revenue, not our clientele, but the bulk of our revenue now comes from the real estate industry. And that's largely because I knew, hey, that I was 25 years old when I got started. And when 2020 hit, I was, beyond 30, almost about 32 years old. And I knew, hey, that 25-year-old now is doing what I did 7 years ago. And chances are I can't compete with that. So need to find other ways to compete. And that's when I identified real estate around 2018 or so. I identified real estate and said, really need to make a push towards this industry, because that's something that the 25-year-old's not going to be doing. So you always have to be pivoting, and this ties to artificial intelligence and your question on artificial intelligence, because by 2030, again, we're going to see another inflection point where AI is going to be implemented. I think it's going to be implemented sooner rather than later. And
Oh yeah.
the reason is because of I mean, this goes beyond the general conversation, but I think it has to do with interest rates and inflation and economics. And what does that mean at the end of the day? It means businesses need to cut costs and and maximize productivity and value. That's what it means at the end of the day. And so you're going to see artificial intelligence. It's already being implemented. It's scratching the surface right now. I think the adoption of artificial intelligence will be much quicker than, let's say, cryptocurrency, which in 2013 that I identified cryptocurrency as something that's going to change the world and the way that finance and banking is done. And here we are today, and it really hasn't scratched a dent. People who have never even heard of cryptocurrency, it's not a part of their lives. Whereas artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, we're here 11 years later. Artificial intelligence, I think we'll see. We saw with ChatGPT, when it went mainstream, within 3 to 4 months, it became the most downloaded program or app on the internet, and that, like I said, that's just scratching the surface. So how can people adapt to this? What can they do? What's going to happen? Are all the jobs going to disappear? What's going to happen? I think you will
Yeah,
see.
I totally agree with you.
We're already seeing in the tech space right now. The unemployment number is really good in the United States, but not in the tech space. In the tech space, in the banking space, those areas are lagging. They're not doing too hot, and layoffs still continue to happen. Tech companies are in hiring freezes or they're cutting. Very few tech companies. If I have friends who's first time in my career, that friends who are my age, senior level, you can consider like mid level or mid to senior level people, laid off, and they're not able to find anything comparable to what they were doing or making before. And that's
And how
largely
much they were
because
making.
that's largely because the job function has the people below them, like the junior managers are now senior managers, and they have to use artificial intelligence technology or outsourcing to like the countries I mentioned, Philippines, India, etc. That's how the companies are saving on costs. So this is actually something that I saw not today in 2024, not even in 2022 or 2023 when ChatGPT started coming on, but I saw this actually way back in 2013 when I started my business. And as I was running it as a one man show, I said it's only a matter of time until this goes mainstream. And so by the end of 2030, yes, we are going to see tons of layoff. I brought up you should always be pivoting, not just as a business owner, but even as just a regular worker
Yes.
or an employee. You want to be learning new skills, learning new languages or new functions, because when layoff time comes, if a computer can do what you're doing, if artificial intelligence can do what you're doing, you're going to get cut, and then you're going to be like these friends who I have who aren't able to find anything that's comparable.
Yes, and we're not having this conversation for the listeners to freak out and kind of be scared of what's coming. It's actually an advantage to kind of know what might be coming. And I love kind of looking in the future for that, and I 100% agree with everything you said. I think we do always need to pivot. I've pivoted so many times in my life and in career, but with having this information, and I think for all our listeners, you guys need to take this and start kind of learning about AI and see what might happen and how you can kind of keep your skills up to date in order to grow as technology grows, right? Even simple thing as social media, as we get older, we tend to not care about it or not keep up with the technology of the social media. But I think in today's world, we all have to keep up with technology or it will take over our jobs one day. But anyways, moving on to your thoughts about the AI. So we talked about how it can actually be like what we can expect from it in the future. But in today's world, for you personally, because this is I'm just picking your brain because this is something that I've been thinking about lately myself. In today's world, how are you doing anything to kind of to try to be on top of the AI game as far as investing in the technology, or are you doing anything to really make sure that if there is an opportunity with AI that your company or yourself is gonna be one of the people who benefit from it versus have it take away from your business?
Well, we use AI within our business. So stuff that we were manually doing before, and I'll give you a great example that ties into this podcast. You can use AI to do the work for you. So for example, there's now a service out, a podcasting service for that uses artificial intelligence to produce podcasts. How does it do that? Previously, we would hire and I used to do this and I stopped doing it. I started outsourcing it, and now I don't even outsource it because it's better to use artificial intelligence. But
Wow.
we would hire another company, or I would have someone in-house contractor who would listen to all the episodes, edit all the ums and ahs, transcribe the full episode, write what are called show notes. So when you see the episode, it's the blurb, the timestamps. You know, at 5 minutes, this is what they talked about. At 10 minutes, this is what they talked about. The summary. Send out the emails to the email list with the subject line and all that. Put it on social media, all that. Well, this service does all of that for you. It's artificial intelligence. And I thought initially when they contacted me because of my book and because I host a podcast myself called the Work From Home Show, they gave me a free subscription for a few months. And I used it and I thought, okay, this thing's going to make errors. It's going to be bad. And then when I started using it, I said, this is incredible. This is like way better than what a human could do. And it does all of this work in 5 minutes. You just upload your audio and then it sends you an email when it's done listening to everything, writing all the notes, and it gives you options too. So that if you don't like, let's say it wants to send out an email uh, saying that this new episode is out, it'll write up 3 different emails and you can pick which one you like the best. That way you're not stuck on one. It'll send you 3 or 4 different subject lines or 3 or 4 different titles for the podcast
It's
episode.
incredible.
Incredible tool. And like I said, we were charging clients without the transcription for all of this stuff about $100 per episode. With the transcription, about $200 to $250 per episode. So because of this, we were able to reduce what we're charging clients, so they're happier, and we're using the artificial intelligence to do really all the work, and it's 10 minutes worth
And
of
that's why
work.
you said you're keeping your costs low for the client, which in today's business world, from whoever I talk to in business is slower than it has been the past few years. So it could be a great, great benefit to try to keep our costs low as entrepreneurs if we can, have a company who's using a lot of AI already to do all that work.
And that's the example that I give is a perfect example of people keep talking about inflation. I even brought up the word inflation, but this is where we're going to see deflation in the cost of services, the cost of goods, because when you have AI doing the work in 1/10 or 1/100th of the time for, again, 1/10 or 1/100th the cost, then the price of everything is going to come back down. So if I'm spending less for the same output, then I go back to my client and say, hey, you know what? We're slashing prices by 50%. Now I don't do that. I don't do that because I'm a good person. I actually wait for the client to say, hey, times are tough. We might need to cut this. Then I have that in my back pocket to say, hey, we can work with you on the price. We'll go ahead and lower the price.
That's excellent. And honestly, from having this conversation, it just sounds like the way some people might pivot is advising our kids to get into programming or in the tech world so they can actually have jobs in the future. Because, like you said, things are going to change, just like how back in the day the assembly workers changed and there was different type of jobs and careers, but only the people who were on top of what's needed in the world were the ones who had jobs. So I think for parents or advisors listening to this episode, is that's kind of where we want to push our kids, is to have more interest in. That's what I'm going to do with my kids. Push them to go more towards technology and programming and engineering, so they can have hopefully a
Well,
smooth
I'll say
transition.
this. I've got 2 young kids also, and it's not a question of making them, hey, become an engineer, become a doctor, or whatever. It's
No,
um,
introducing them to it, just kind of introducing it to them at a young age, because that's, no matter what, it's going to be part of at least their young adulthood, right?
well, I don't even think it should be an introduction. I think similar to how, like in the United States, English is a course that you have to take every year through college. From the time you're in pre-K through college, you're in English class, and you're learning and you're reading more advanced books. And I think this actually it can't be an elective, it can't be an option. It has to be a mandatory part. You can still become, let's say, an accountant or a doctor, but no matter what field you go into, no matter what field, from owning a restaurant or a store, you have to know how to use artificial intelligence. Have to know how to work with it. And really quickly, I'll share some courses or some degree types that people should absolutely. This is what you should really try to focus on. Machine learning, computer science, data science, math, physics, of course, artificial intelligence, anything data analysis, robotics, statistics.
Virtual reality.
So virtual reality, they don't have those that will be covered in these courses. Actually, that's not like a study yet, but that's certainly a field that's growing as well. So that's the important thing. It's I know that kids are now being exposed to phones and tablets at an earlier age than ever, but because they still need to learn the basics and the fundamentals because no matter what they do, they have to be tech oriented moving forward. There's no more, you can't get away like our parents' generation could get away with like not being able to use a computer. You can't do that anymore.
Not anymore. Definitely not anymore. Okay, so let's go back. I totally got off track with all the questions I actually prepared to ask you.
That's
But
fine.
I want to get to know you a little bit for our listeners. It's always fun. In your intro, actually, I think one thing that we didn't talk about it that I found very fascinating because I love the martial arts world as well. You have a first degree black belt in Taekwondo. And congratulations on that, by the way. It's a great skill or life. I think it's a life lesson type of skill to have. What would you say is how did you get into that, first of all, and at what age? And what would you say your biggest lesson from it was, a life lesson?
First off, how did I get into it? That's purely my parents. I was not even old enough to make any decisions for myself. I must have been 5 years old when I got into, maybe even, yeah, I was five probably when I got into Taekwondo. And it was a point in my life where it was the right thing at the right time. It's a huge time commitment. When you're that young, you can commit that time to earning that black belt. In my case, it was a first degree. And then I kind of outgrew that phase and moved on to other things. But with that being said, what did I learn? Definitely at such a young age, I would say the biggest thing is self discipline and this idea and concept of personal responsibility. When you're sparring with other partners, there's no help coming your way. You can't ask for your mommy or your daddy to come. When you're sparring against somebody who's twice your size, you're up against situations where you need to figure out, hey, how am I going to survive, or how am I going to win? So I think being put in those situations at a young age definitely has helped me personality wise. It's helped me in my business career because I told you I've been running my business now for more than 11 years and it's a grind. It's a grind and there were certainly times when I had similar to sparring in the ring with somebody. I had my back against a wall and I thought, "Hey, you know what? I may not make it by the end of this year or I'm having problems this year and I don't know if I'm going to be around in 2 or 3 years." And the fact that I've been surviving and been able to start a second business as a result of the first business, a real estate investment company, it just goes to show that you have to put your children, you were talking about children earlier, you have to put them in situations of adversity where they need to show their strength because if we're going to continue to coddle our kids, then we're going to turn into, or not we're going to turn into, but the kids who are not coddled are going to have several legs up because they're going to be the ones starting that business when they're 25 years old, 26 years old, and not our children. So that's the biggest thing that I've learned from the Taekwondo. It's the self responsibility, it's the discipline,
Discipline, yeah.
it's the instructor getting on you. Hey, you didn't listen to me. I said to do X, Y, and Z, and you didn't do it. Therefore, here's your punishment. And just that type of holding oneself accountability. That's another huge thing as well. And these are all you can take away really good business lessons from all these. And it's not just made me a better business person, a better manager, but also a better parent.
Yes, I'm a big believer of that too, and that's why I wanted to bring it up for our listeners. Even as an adult, I think it can benefit one, and I know there are adult classes for all sorts of martial arts. So that's something actually I've been thinking about getting back into. I'm definitely not a black belt. I have just tried a few different things. I actually ended up sticking with kickboxing, which doesn't have any belts, but I did try jujitsu and stayed at a white belt. But anyways, a little bit background for about me too is I've always had interest in martial arts because I do think it does teach discipline. My little experience that I had with it, and commitment, and like you said, strength and confidence. Confidence is another huge thing to have as a child or even as an adult. So I wanted to bring it up for our listeners who are kind of struggling because I know it's times are a little bit tough now again for entrepreneurs too after COVID. Some people recover, some people are going downhill still. So I think doing anything like that to boost yourself up can be a really game changer. Now, since we talked about your back being against the wall or you having hard times within business, I always like to ask my entrepreneurs if you can share your most difficult experience running your business or the biggest trouble you've had and how you overcame it and how you pivoted as we spoke about before.
I'm going to talk about two different experiences I had and the takeaways that, because this is going to happen to everybody. The first thing is, do not start a business that is dependent on one client or one product or one service or one customer. You want to,
What do you
oh,
mean? So,
yep, and I'm
as
going to
far as
elaborate.
industry?
Yeah, well, industry is fine, but I'm just saying, for example, let's say I started Krish Media Marketing and I had one client that we were getting 80 to 90% of our revenue from. This actually happened at one point in our business. And a lot of new business owners make this mistake because they get one client who's really high paying, really good, and they get excited and they say, all right, I'm good. And then that contract comes up, the 1 year comes up, and the contract's not renewed. And then now they're stuck. Now it's like, oh, shoot, now I don't have any other clients. I don't have any revenue stream coming in. What do I do? You want to always have that abundance mentality, so you get one big one, we'll try to get that second big one and that third big one. Yeah, it's gonna be more work, but just keep growing because I've seen this happen so many times where people get one client, they're dependent on that client, then they lose that client, and that's the end of the business. And then they're
Well,
screwed.
yeah, it goes back to, that investing principle, diversify. I feel like with even with your clients, it's pretty much the same thing. And you're probably referring to a big client as in a company that can produce, a lot of work for your company, not just one individual. Who has like a small business, but for our listeners, so it sounds like you went through that trouble. So you had a big client, you lost it, then you had to kind of try to figure out how to earn that same income that you were used to. Can you talk a little bit about more? Can you talk a little bit more about that challenge and what you did to overcome it?
Well, a mentor of mine is the one who told me what I just told you when I was getting started, and I took it to heart, but I also took it to granted because everyone will have this defense mechanism of, oh, it's not going to happen to me. That might happen to everybody else, but it's not going to happen to me. And so when it did happen to me, I was, at least, because I did take that advice to heart, I at least could withstand the pain, the initial pain of losing that big client, because I had four or five other clients. But at the same time, I still wasn't making what I was when I had that client. And so fortunately, I was in talks anyway with another big client, and ended up landing that client and ended up making more. But this is where I say it's important. You don't just, when you land a big client, you don't just stop and become complacent. You have to keep growing. You have to get that second one and that third one and that fourth one. And so the first time that happened, about 2 years into my business, I made sure that I was never going to be put in that position again. So that 3 or 4 years later, when it happened again, it was just a blip. I didn't even feel it because I had so many other big clients. And so then
I
I brought
see.
up Krish Media Marketing allowed me to start a second business. So that's again talking about diversifying. I started a second business, a real estate investment company, that is basically another lifeline to, if something happened to Krish Media and Marketing for any reason, hey, well, I have this other business now that I can uh, go all in on and run, and I am all in on it, and it's going just fine. So you always have to be growing and diversifying. There, you can never be complacent, really, ever. Really, not until retirement age, I would say.
Yes, well, just like for our personal growth too, anytime we stop working on ourselves, it affects our business as well. Just in life, I feel like if you really dig deep about what life is about as humans, we always have to find a way to grow or things stop working for us. That's what I've learned in my life. So anytime I've stopped growing in any area, if it's for pleasure, if it's business, if it's personal growth, things just haven't been where they needed to be. And then I'm like, oh, I need to hustle again and either plan something fun so I can grow, my joy, or plan a seminar to grow my skills. Anyway, so going back to my questionnaire, and we talked about life a little bit, or I brought it up. I want to transition into kind of your mentality of an entrepreneur. I think an entrepreneur or somebody who kind of goes on their own and really goes all in is a unicorn. And not everybody can do it, and it's definitely not right for everybody, because no matter how amazing it sounds, it's also a lot of responsibility and a lot of headaches when it's and it doesn't fit every single person's personality or of what they actually want. A lot of people think they want to be entrepreneurs, but it's not the right fit for them. Would you say being an entrepreneur was what you thought it was going to be initially when you got into it, or what has surprised you about it?
No, I had no idea what being an entrepreneur was. I didn't know anything about it, and it has turned out to be a great decision that I can never go back and work a full-time job at a company, like full-time, maybe part-time or something. But a lot of it is because entrepreneurship is not taught to, especially when I was growing up, very few people I knew like their parents weren't entrepreneurs. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, so it was always like going into a clinic or a hospital or an office, a corporate office, like leaving early in the morning and having bosses. And I honestly thought that's how my life was going to end up. And very quickly, at an extremely young age, like by the time I was 20 years old, I realized that that was not what I was best suited to do. It was maybe like 20, it was actually more like 23, 22, 23 years old. That there's just no way, it was not a sustainable way for me to live, because I felt like there was so much more I could contribute and add, so much more value that I could provide on my own, not working within a company. So jumping into entrepreneurship when I was 24 years old, I actually, to answer your question again, I had no clue what I was getting myself into, what the lifestyle was going to be like, what the money was going to be like. It was a learning process, and I figured it out fairly quickly though. By year, I'd say by year 2 or 3, I got the hang of it, of this whole work from home, working in tech, entrepreneurship thing. I got the hang of it, and I come on podcasts like yours. I started my own podcast, the Work from Home Show, because I encourage everybody to find that entrepreneurial itch that you have within your body, that just that tiny little itch, and to pursue it. Now, maybe you don't have that itch. That's fine, because everyone's built differently. Everyone is different. So maybe being an entrepreneur is not, I know many people, family members, friends, they're not built to be entrepreneurs, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But there are other people who certainly have that itch, and I think they should jump headfirst into it, just like I did.
So you also mentioned that you have listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books and enjoy a lot of learning on your end. What are some books or podcasts that you recommend to our listeners?
I'm going to give a little longer answer than just answering the question outright, because this is really important. I think this has been one of the keys to my business being in business today, and being on this podcast today. When I got started in 2013, I actually quickly realized, and most business owners at the beginning will tell you this, the beginning is very strenuous and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But then you reach this state just after the beginning where all of a sudden you're seeing, okay, it's kind of on automated, it's kind of on autopilot, and you have more time on your hands. And especially working from home, mine were home based, it was a home based business tech. I had more time on my hands. And that's when I started, like you just asked, listening to copious and copious amounts of podcasts and reading copious amounts of books. So in 2013 and 2014 alone, I very likely read more than 50 books. So that's
Wow.
almost one book every 2 weeks or so. Um, and I listen to about 40 to 50 hours worth of podcasts every month. So when you
Wow.
combine the book reading, the book writing, because that's when I started writing my first few books as well, along with the podcast listening, you end up learning a lot about business, about entrepreneurship. That's what I focused on: business, entrepreneur, also on spirituality, on human psychology, and on personal self improvement, personal development. To share some of the books that helped me out a lot, there's one book called The Long Tail by Chris Anderson. It's now maybe 15 years old or so. Highly recommend. It's a business book, and for business people looking to get into business, that book, it's called The Long Tail because on a curve, when you see the tail end, that tail on the end, that tail is actually very ends up being very long because when you discover a niche, that niche is small, but it actually there's a good chance that it's going to have a very long life cycle or a long line of customers or clients. So that book goes into details about that. Um, Regarding personal development, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey is one of the greatest books written in human history.
Yes, I've read
It
that one. I actually vouch for that one.
We've covered it on our podcast, a work from home show. I've read it. I implemented a lot of the practices into my own daily life. So there's mental health, spiritual health, um, emotional health, and physical health. Mental, spiritual, emotional, physical. So I actually tried to work on all four of those things, and I'm still doing a pretty good job on three of them. Physical, I can do a little better. Uh, After having kids, it's been more difficult to do the physical
I could
stuff.
relate. I have three tiny kids myself.
Yeah. So that book, it absolutely does help you on the business side, on the entrepreneurship side. Podcasts, my podcasts. I know you wanted me to get a chance to plug my own show, but I'm the host of the Work from Home show, and we cover a lot of excellent topics from business, entrepreneurship to work from home, productivity hacks, politics, economics, finance, investing, you name it. So definitely recommend just go to your podcast app, type in Work from Home show. You
And
can
we'll
check it
link
out
all
there.
of that below. We'll
Yep,
definitely
yep.
link all of your information below so everybody can find you. And like I said, I really, just from speaking with you and seeing your background and what you've accomplished, I can really see you're such a visionary. And I'm excited to kind of follow you on your journey too, to see what you're going to be doing in 2030. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're in 2024 already. But again, thank you so much for your time. I know we're running low on time, and I respect your time. Thank you for being here, sharing all your wisdom, everything you've learned along your entrepreneurial journey, your education, your work background, and of course your expertise in marketing. We didn't get a chance to go too much in detail into all the different types of digital marketing, but I know my listeners can really benefit from that. I want to encourage all of our listeners to go and check out Krish Media and Marketing to see all the different marketing options for your business, and in order for you to be able to see all of the amazing services they have to offer. But before I close, please tell our listeners your last words of encouragement.
Well, I would say about, I'm going to leave you with some skills that people should take away. Number one is value creation. Number two is focus. Number three is leverage. And number four is skills, actual skills. So if you can do those four things, so you find ways to create value. Number two is you become so good at what you do that you create leverage for yourself that will help you be a better negotiator. I mean, we could have an entire 30-minute discussion about all this. Number three, like I said,
Well, people can check out your podcast, and I'm sure you talk about all
yep,
of this, right?
yep, we talk about all this. And then the skills that I mentioned, we talked about this on your show. The artificial intelligence stuff, the computer science, the data science, the math, the physics. You need to build up skills, the technology skills, the spoken skills, communication, reading, writing, speaking, technology, the artificial intelligence. You have to build those up. So if you're young and listening to this, you should be excited. If you're older, you should be adapting and innovating. So if you focus on these areas, focus, leverage, focus is what I didn't talk about. So focus is just the idea of focusing on these actual things, and don't waste time or energy or mind share on other
Get
things.
that 7 Habits book, and that should help you focus.
Yep, exactly. So it's focusing, and it's also focusing on the right things. So, and I see that in business. They're focusing on the business, but let's say, for example, you're getting 80% of your revenue from one source. I see that our clients sometimes will be focusing on the wrong sources rather than the source that's producing most of the revenue. So you can be spending a lot of time acting focused, but you're not focusing on the right thing. So that's really, and that's why you hear the term a lot, working smart rather than working hard or spending a lot of time. These people who work smart tend to focus on all the right things, and that's why they end up doing well. So focus, leverage, value creation, and skills. Those are today's currencies.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And to our listeners, thank you for always tuning in. Until next week. Bye. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.